The night her father died was the night Beatrice Palmer learned that some fears were too heavy to carry alone. But she would not discover this truth until a stranger with kind eyes found her trembling beneath an indifferent sky. Parowan, Utah in 1878 was not a forgiving place for a 22-year-old woman with no family and nothing but a ramshackle cabin on the edge of town. Beatrice had watched her father take his last rattling breath 3 days ago, his body finally surrendering to the consumption that had hollowed him out over the past year. She had buried him herself in the hard ground behind their property, her hands blistering around the shovel handle, her tears mixing with the dust that seemed to coat everything in this unforgiving territory. Now she sat on the porch steps of the cabin she could no longer afford to keep, staring up at the vast expanse of stars that dominated the Utah night sky, counting them one by one in a desperate attempt to quiet the panic that clawed at her chest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her breath came in short gasps. 5, 6, 7. What would she do tomorrow? 8, 9, 10. Where would she go? 11, 12, 13. How would she survive? The stars blurred as fresh tears welled in her eyes. She had no other family, no close friends in Parowan who might take her in. Her father had been a solitary man, moving them here 5 years ago after her mother's death, seeking work in the iron mines that had given the town its brief prosperity. But the mines were struggling now, and her father's illness had consumed what little savings they had managed to scrape together. The landlord, a cruel man named Silas Garrett, had already been by twice demanding the back rent they owed. He had given her until the end of the week to pay or vacate. That gave her 4 more days. 14, 15, 16. She forced herself to keep counting, her voice a whisper in the darkness. 17, 18, 19. That is a lot of stars to count. Beatrice gasped and scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs. A man stood at the edge of her property, barely visible in the starlight. She could make out his silhouette, tall and broad-shouldered, and the gleam of something metallic at his hip. A gun. Her hand instinctively reached for the rifle her father kept by the door. "I mean no harm, miss," the stranger said quickly, raising both hands. "I heard you counting and thought you might be in some kind of trouble." "I am fine," Beatrice said, though her voice shook. "You should move along. Forgive me for saying so, but a woman sitting alone in the dark counting stars does not seem fine to me." His voice was gentle, tinged with concern rather than threat. "My name is Henry Owens. I just rode into town this evening looking for work and a place to rest my horse. The livery owner pointed me toward the boarding house, but I took a wrong turn in the dark." Beatrice's grip on the rifle loosened slightly, though she did not set it down. "The boarding house is back toward the center of town. You have walked too far east." "I figured as much." Henry took a step closer, and in the starlight Beatrice could see him more clearly now. He wore a dusty brown coat over a faded blue shirt, a kerchief tied loosely around his neck. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair and a face that looked weathered but not unkind. He appeared to be perhaps 25 or 26, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. Instead, he was looking at her with an expression of genuine concern. "Are you sure you are all right, miss? You seem frightened of more than just a lost stranger." Something about his voice, so steady and calm in the chaos of her thoughts, made the carefully constructed walls around Beatrice's composure crumble. To her horror, she felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. She turned away quickly, not wanting this stranger to see her weakness. "I am sorry," she managed. "You should go. I am fine." She heard his boots crunch on the dry ground as he came closer. "Begging your pardon, miss, but I have traveled a long way and seen a lot of people, and you are not fine. Now, I am not the sort of man who walks away when someone is clearly suffering. So why don't you tell me what has you so scared that you are out here counting stars like they might save you?" Beatrice turned to face him, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. In the starlight, she could see that his expression remained open and kind. There was something about him that made her want to trust him, though every bit of common sense told her she should send him away. But common sense had not helped her these past 3 days. Common sense had not told her how to survive. "I was counting them to fight my fear," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "To try to calm myself down. My father died 3 days ago. I have no family, no money, and the landlord wants me out by the end of the week. I do not know what to do or where to go. So I sat here counting stars because it was the only thing I could think to do." Henry was quiet for a long moment, and Beatrice braced herself for him to make excuses and leave. Instead, he moved closer until he was standing at the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at her with those steady eyes. "Then count on me instead," he said simply. "I will never fade like those stars do when the sun comes up. I do not know you, miss, and you do not know me, but I am telling you right now that you are not alone anymore. I will help you figure this out." Beatrice stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You do not even know me. Why would you help me?" "Because you need help, and I can give it." Henry shrugged as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "My mother raised me to be useful and to help people when they need it. Besides, I am looking for work anyway. Maybe I can find something that pays enough to help you with your rent situation. At the very least, I can help you figure out your options. You would do that for a stranger." Beatrice felt a flicker of something she had not felt in days. Hope, perhaps, or at least the possibility of it. We are only strangers until we introduce ourselves properly, which we just did. So now we are acquaintances. Give me a few days and we will be friends. Give me a week and I will have helped you solve this problem." Henry smiled then, and Beatrice saw that she had been right about those lines around his eyes. He had a warm smile that reached all the way up to his gaze. "What do you say, Miss Palmer? Will you let me help you?" Beatrice looked at this man, this stranger who had appeared out of the darkness like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to form, and felt something shift in her chest. The fear was still there, but it was no longer quite so overwhelming. She nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will let you help me." Henry's smile widened. "Good. Now, first things first. Have you eaten today?" Beatrice tried to remember and realized she could not recall her last meal. She shook her head. "Right. Let me go back into town and get us some food. You stay here and rest. I will be back within the hour and then we will sit down and make a proper plan. Does that sound all right? You do not have to do that. I have some beans inside." "I am sure you do, but you look like you are about to fall over and I doubt you have the energy to cook them. Let me do this, Miss Palmer. Besides, I have not eaten since this morning either and I am hungry enough to eat a horse." He tipped his hat to her. "I will be back soon. Try not to worry too much while I am gone." Before Beatrice could protest further, Henry turned and walked back toward town with long, purposeful strides. She stood on the porch watching him go, the rifle still clutched in one hand, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake, or if perhaps God had finally decided to show her some mercy. True to his word, Henry returned less than an hour later carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle that smelled like fresh bread and cooked meat. Beatrice had gone inside and lit a lamp, and now she opened the door to find him standing there with that same kind expression. "May I come in?" he asked. "Or would you prefer to eat outside? I understand if you do not feel comfortable letting me in your home." Beatrice appreciated his consideration. Another man might have simply walked in, assuming his good deed gave him rights he had not earned. "You may come in," she said, stepping aside. "You have been kind to me. The least I can do is offer you a place to sit." The cabin was small, just 2 rooms really, with a main living area that served as kitchen and sitting room and a bedroom in the back where her father had slept during his illness. Beatrice had been sleeping on a pallet by the fireplace for the past several months, unwilling to take the bed while he was so sick. The furnishings were sparse and worn, but everything was clean. She had always taken pride in keeping a tidy home. Henry set the bundle on the rough wooden table and unwrapped it to reveal 2 portions of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and a small container of butter. "The woman at the boarding house was kind enough to sell me some of her dinner. I hope you like chicken." "I do," Beatrice said, her stomach suddenly reminding her how empty it was. "Thank you, Mr. Owens. This is very generous. Call me Henry, please. And it is not generosity, just common decency." He pulled out one of the 2 chairs at the table and gestured for her to sit. "Eat. We can talk after." They ate in comfortable silence, and Beatrice found herself studying Henry when he was not looking. He had removed his hat, revealing hair that was indeed dark brown and slightly too long, curling at the collar of his shirt. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, with a strong jaw and a straight nose. He was handsome, she realized, in a rough and practical way. But more than his appearance, there was something about his presence that made her feel safer than she had felt in a very long time. He ate with the efficient manner of someone accustomed to trail rations and uncertain meals, but he had good manners and did not talk with his mouth full. When they had finished eating, Henry pushed his plate aside and folded his hands on the table. "All right, Miss Palmer, tell me everything. How much rent do you owe and what are your options?" Beatrice took a deep breath. "I owe 3 months back rent, $50 total. My father was too sick to work for the last few months of his life, and we used up all our savings paying for medicine that did not help. The landlord, Mr. Garrett, has given me until Saturday to pay or leave. I have been trying to think of what I could do. I could sell the furniture, but it is not worth much. I have thought about trying to find work, but most of the businesses in town do not hire women for anything but cooking or laundry, and those jobs do not pay enough for me to earn $50 in 4 days. What about after Saturday? If you have to leave, where would you go?" "I have been trying to figure that out." Beatrice's voice caught in her throat. "I have no family. My mother died when I was 17, and it was just my father and me after that. I thought perhaps I could try to get to Salt Lake City. There might be more opportunities there. But the journey is dangerous for a woman alone, and I do not have money for a stagecoach ticket." Henry was quiet for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "What if you did not have to leave? What if we could find a way for you to stay?" "I do not see how that is possible unless I can come up with $50 in 4 days. What if you had a business partner, someone who could help with the rent in exchange for sharing the space?" Beatrice looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean me. I am looking for work and a place to stay. What if I stayed here and helped you with the rent? I could sleep out in the barn if you have one, or on the floor in here. In return, I would pay half the rent going forward. That would not solve your immediate problem of the back rent, but it would make it more manageable. And I am good with my hands. I can find work as a laborer or ranch hand easily enough. Between the 2 of us, we might be able to scrape together enough to at least negotiate with your landlord." "You would do that? Live here and help me pay rent?" Beatrice could hardly believe what she was hearing. "But you do not know me at all. What if I am terrible to live with? What if I am a thief or a liar?" Henry smiled. "Are you a thief or a liar?" "No, of course not." "Then I am not worried. Look, Miss Palmer, I can see you are a decent person in a bad situation. I have been in bad situations before, and I know how much it helps to have someone in your corner. Besides, I need a place to stay anyway, and the boarding house charges too much for my liking. This arrangement would help us both. Beatrice felt tears prick at her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than despair. I do not know what to say. This is so kind of you. Say yes, and then show me where I can bed down for the night. It has been a long day of riding and I am exhausted. There is a small barn out back. It is not much, but it is dry and there is hay for your horse. I will get you some blankets. That sounds perfect. They stood, and Beatrice found herself looking up at Henry with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked softly. "The truth." Henry met her gaze steadily. "The truth is that I have spent the last 5 years drifting from town to town, working where I could and moving on when the mood struck. It is a lonely way to live, and lately I have been thinking it might be time to settle down somewhere. When I rode into Parowan today, something about this place felt right. And then I found you, counting stars and fighting your fear, and I thought maybe this was where I was supposed to stop. Maybe I was supposed to find you." He paused, then added, "I know that probably sounds foolish." "No," Beatrice said quietly. "It does not sound foolish at all." That night, after she had set Henry up in the barn with blankets and a pillow, Beatrice lay on her pallet by the fireplace and stared at the ceiling. For the first time since her father's death, she felt like she might actually be able to breathe. The fear was still there, lurking at the edges of her consciousness, but it was no longer suffocating her. Henry had said to count on him instead of the stars, and incredibly, she found that she believed him. There was something about him that inspired trust, something solid and dependable in a world that had proven itself to be anything but. She wondered what her father would think of this arrangement. He had been protective of her, perhaps overly so after her mother's death. But he had also been practical, and she thought he would approve of her finding a way to survive. And Henry seemed like a good man, the kind of man her father would have respected. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Beatrice realized she was not counting stars anymore. She was counting possibilities instead. The next morning, Beatrice woke to the sound of someone chopping wood. She sat up, confused for a moment, and then remembered. Henry. She quickly braided her long blonde hair and smoothed down her dress before stepping outside into the cool morning air. Henry was indeed chopping wood, his coat discarded and his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. A neat pile of split logs sat beside him. He looked up when he heard the door and gave her a cheerful wave. "Good morning, Miss Palmer. I hope I did not wake you." "You did, but I should have been up anyway." Beatrice walked over to him, surprised by how much wood he had already split. "You did not have to do that. I wanted to make myself useful. Besides, I noticed your wood pile was getting low, and winter is not that far off." He sank the axe into the chopping block and wiped his brow with his kerchief. "I was thinking we should head into town this morning and see about finding me some work. The sooner I can start earning, the sooner we can deal with your rent situation. I should look for work too. Do you have any particular skills, things you are good at?" Beatrice thought about it. "I can sew well. My mother taught me. I can also cook and keep house. My father always said I made the best biscuits in Utah Territory." Henry's face lit up. "Sewing. That could be very useful. Every ranch and farm around here has men who need their clothes mended and do not have wives to do it. What if you took in sewing work? I bet you could make decent money doing alterations and repairs." "I never thought of that," Beatrice admitted. "I always just sewed for my father and myself." "Well, think about it now. Come on, let us get some breakfast in us and then head into town. We have a lot to do." They made a simple breakfast of coffee and the leftover bread from the night before, and then walked together into Parowan proper. The town was small but bustling, built around the iron industry that had drawn settlers to this part of Utah. The main street was lined with businesses: a general store, a saloon, the boarding house, a blacksmith, and a few other establishments. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding snow even in late summer. Their first stop was the general store, where Henry asked the proprietor, an older man named Mr. Walsh, if he knew of anyone looking to hire workers. Mr. Walsh scratched his chin thoughtfully. "There is always work at the ranches around here if you are willing to do hard labor. The Jensen Ranch about 5 miles north is looking for hands. Good people, the Jensens, fair pay and decent conditions." "I will ride out there this afternoon," Henry said. "Thank you kindly." "And what about you, Miss Palmer?" Mr. Walsh asked. "I heard about your father." "I am sorry for your loss. He was a good man." "Thank you," Beatrice said softly. "I am looking for work myself. I was wondering if you knew anyone who might need sewing done, mending, alterations, that sort of thing." Mr. Walsh's face brightened. "Now that you mention it, my wife has been complaining about how hard it is to keep up with all the sewing requests she gets. People are always coming and asking if she knows anyone who can mend their clothes or take in a dress. She does what she can, but she has her hands full running this store with me. If you are good with a needle, I bet she could send some business your way." "I would be very grateful for that, Mr. Walsh. Come back this afternoon and talk to her. She is visiting her sister this morning, but she will be back after lunch." Encouraged by this promising start, Henry and Beatrice continued their walk through town. They stopped at the boarding house, where Henry spoke with the proprietress, Mrs. Donnelly, a stout Irish woman with shrewd eyes and a warm smile. When she heard about Beatrice's situation, she immediately offered to spread the word about her sewing services. "Every man in this town needs his clothes mended at some point, dear. You get yourself established and I will send business your way. Lord knows I am tired of doing repairs for my boarders." "That is very kind of you, Mrs. Donnelly," Beatrice said, feeling a surge of hope. "Not kind, just practical. We women have to help each other out here. Lord knows the men would not survive without us." She gave Henry an appraising look. "And you seem like one of the good ones, Mr. Owens. Make sure you take care of our Miss Palmer here. She has had a hard time of it lately." "I intend to, madam," Henry said seriously. Their next stop was the landlord's office. Beatrice had been dreading this conversation, but Henry insisted they should try to negotiate before Saturday arrived. Silas Garrett's office was in a small building near the saloon. He was a man of about 50 with thinning hair and cold eyes that calculated the value of everything they looked at. "Miss Palmer," he said when they entered, "I hope you are here to pay your debt." "Not yet, Mr. Garrett, but I wanted to talk to you about my situation." Beatrice forced herself to meet his gaze. "This is Mr. Owens. He is going to be staying at my cabin and helping me with the rent going forward. We are both finding work and we wanted to ask if you might be willing to give us a little more time to pay what I owe." Garrett looked Henry up and down dismissively. "And why should I do that? I have already been more than patient. 3 months of missed rent is unacceptable." "I understand that, sir," Henry said calmly, "but throwing Miss Palmer out does not benefit you either. You will have an empty property and no guarantee of finding another tenant quickly. If you give us 2 weeks, we will pay you what is owed. You have my word on that." "Your word? I do not know you from Adam. Why should I trust your word?" "Because I am giving it to you and I do not give my word lightly. 2 weeks, Mr. Garrett. That is all we are asking." Garrett leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming on the desk. 2 weeks, and the amount owed goes up to $60, $10 extra for my trouble and lost income. It was extortion and they all knew it, but Beatrice found herself nodding before Henry could protest. We agree. $60 in 2 weeks. Fine. But if you do not have it by then, you are out immediately, and I will keep any possessions left behind to cover my losses. We will have it, Henry said firmly. Outside, Beatrice let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. $60 in 2 weeks. How are we going to do that? We are going to work harder than we have ever worked before, Henry said. But we will do it. I promise you, Beatrice, we will do it. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his voice sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. She looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life less than a day ago and was already fighting her battles alongside her, and felt something shift inside her. It was too soon to call it affection, perhaps, but it was definitely the beginning of something. Thank you, Henry, she said softly. For everything. He smiled at her, that warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. You can thank me when we have that $60 in hand and get it off your back. Come on, let us get you back to talk to Mrs. Walsh about that sewing work, and then I am going to ride out to the Jensen ranch. The afternoon proved to be productive. Mrs. Walsh, a kind woman with graying hair and a practical manner, was delighted to hear about Beatrice's sewing skills. She immediately gave Beatrice a basket full of mending work from various townspeople, promising that there would be more if she did good work. Most of these are simple repairs, Mrs. Walsh explained, but there are a few that need more skill. Take your time and do it right, and I promise you will have more work than you can handle. Beatrice took the basket gratefully, her mind already cataloging the repairs and calculating how much she might charge for each. It was not a fortune, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Henry rode out to the Jensen ranch and returned that evening with even better news. Mr. Jensen had hired him on the spot as a ranch hand, offering him $1 a day for 6 days of work a week. It was hard labor, tending cattle and mending fences and helping with whatever needed doing, but Henry had never been afraid of hard work. If I work 6 days a week for 2 weeks, that is $12, Henry said as they sat at Beatrice's table that evening, figuring their finances. How much do you think you can make with the sewing? Mrs. Walsh gave me about 20 items in this basket. If I charge between 50 cents and $2 depending on the complexity, I might be able to make $20 or $30 if I work quickly. That gets us to about $40 or $42. We need 20 more. Beatrice chewed her lip, thinking, I could sell some things. The furniture is not worth much, but I have some of my mother's jewelry. Nothing fancy, but it might be worth a few dollars. Let us keep that as a last resort, Henry said. I will ask around at the ranch. Maybe there is extra work I can do in the evenings, or maybe someone needs help with a project. We will figure it out. Over the next week, they fell into a routine. Henry woke before dawn and rode out to the Jensen ranch, returning in the evening tired and dusty but always in good spirits. Beatrice spent her days sewing, her fingers flying over the fabric as she repaired torn shirts, altered dresses, and patched work pants. She worked by lamplight late into the night, determined to finish everything in the basket as quickly as possible. On the evening of the 3rd day, Henry came home with exciting news. He had mentioned their situation to Mr. Jensen, who had offered him extra work helping to build a new barn. It would mean longer days, but it would pay an additional 50 cents a day. That is wonderful, Beatrice said, though she felt a pang of guilt at how hard Henry was working. But you must be exhausted. Are you sure you can manage it? I can manage, Henry assured her. I've done harder work for less pay. Besides, I like Mr. Jensen. He is a good man and his ranch is well run. He treats his workers fairly and does not ask more than he is willing to do himself. As the days passed, Beatrice found herself looking forward to the evenings when Henry would return. They would sit together at her small table, sharing whatever simple meal she had prepared, and talk about their days. Henry told her stories about the ranch, about the ornery bull that had nearly gored him and the beautiful view from the north pasture. Beatrice told him about the people whose clothes she was mending, how you could tell so much about someone from the wear patterns on their garments. Mrs. Walsh brought me a dress today that belongs to the schoolteacher, Miss Henderson, Beatrice said one evening as she worked on a particularly intricate repair by lamplight. The hem was completely shredded. She must walk miles every day. Henry, who was sitting across from her oiling his saddle, looked up with interest. That is Miss Catherine Henderson, I would guess. Mr. Jensen's daughter mentioned her. She is apparently quite dedicated, walks to visit the families of students who live on the outlying farms to check on their progress. That is admirable, Beatrice said, carefully stitching the hem back together. I hope she appreciates the repair. This is delicate work. I am sure she will. You are very talented, you know. I have been watching you work and your stitches are so small and even. It is impressive. Beatrice felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. My mother taught me. She said that sewing poorly was a sign of a lazy mind and she would not tolerate laziness. She sounds like she was a strong woman. She was. I wish you could have met her. I think you would have liked her. Beatrice paused, then added softly, I think she would have liked you too. Their eyes met across the table and something unspoken passed between them. Over the past week, Beatrice had found herself growing increasingly aware of Henry's presence in her life. The way he always made sure she had eaten before he started his own meal. The way he had fixed the loose board on her porch without being asked. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, as if her words were important. She had never known a man quite like him, and she was beginning to realize that her feelings were developing into something deeper than gratitude. If Henry noticed her growing attachment, he did not mention it. He was always respectful, always proper, never overstepping the bounds of their arrangement. He slept in the barn and never came into the cabin without knocking first. But Beatrice sometimes caught him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something soft and wondering in his gaze. By the end of the first week, they had made good progress. Henry's work at the ranch had earned him $9, and Beatrice had completed the first batch of sewing and earned $25, more than she had hoped. Mrs. Walsh had been so impressed with her work that she had already brought another basket of items. We are at $34, Henry said on Sunday evening, their one day off. We need 26 more by Saturday. It is tight, but we can do it. I have another basket of sewing, and Mrs. Donnelly sent word that several of her boarders want work done. That should bring in at least $15 more. And I will have 6 more days of work at the ranch, plus the extra barn work. That is another $9. We are going to be close. Too close, Beatrice said, anxiety creeping into her voice. What if something goes wrong? What if someone does not pay me, or you get hurt and cannot work? Henry reached across the table and took her hand, the first time he had touched her beyond helping her down from a wagon or handing her something. His hand was rough and calloused from work, but his grip was gentle. Nothing is going to go wrong, he said firmly. We are going to make this work, Beatrice. You have to trust me. I do trust you, she said, and realized it was completely true. She trusted this man who had been a stranger just a week ago more than she had trusted anyone in a long time. I am just scared. I know. But you do not have to count stars anymore, remember? You count on me and I am not going to fade. I am going to be right here with you until we get through this. Beatrice felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were good tears this time. She squeezed his hand. How did I get so lucky? You appearing out of nowhere like you did. Maybe it was not luck. Maybe it was just meant to be. Henry smiled at her, and in the lamplight his face looked so kind and handsome that Beatrice felt her heart skip a beat. "I am glad I found you, Beatrice. These past days, working hard and coming home to you each evening, it has felt more like home than anywhere I have been in years." "It has felt like home to me too," Beatrice whispered. "I was so alone after my father died, and now I am not. You gave me that, Henry. You gave me hope when I had none." They sat there for a long moment, hands clasped across the table, the lamplight flickering between them. Beatrice thought Henry might say something more, might acknowledge the feelings that were clearly growing between them, but instead he gave her hand one more gentle squeeze and stood. "I should get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. You should rest too. Do not stay up too late sewing." "I will not," Beatrice promised, though they both knew she would work until her eyes refused to focus anymore. After Henry left, Beatrice sat alone in the lamplight, her hand still warm from his touch. She realized that somewhere over the past week, her feelings for Henry had transformed from gratitude to something much deeper. She was falling in love with him, this kind stranger who had promised not to fade, and the realization both thrilled and terrified her. What if he did not feel the same way? What if he was just being kind, and once they paid the rent he would move on to the next town like he had done so many times before? She pushed the thoughts away and focused on her sewing. There would be time to worry about her heart after they had dealt with the more practical problem of keeping a roof over their heads. The second week was even more grueling than the first. Henry worked from dawn until well after dark each day, helping to frame the new barn at the Jensen Ranch in addition to his regular duties. He came home exhausted, his hands blistered and his shoulders aching, but he never complained. Beatrice worked just as hard, her fingers cramping from the constant sewing, her eyes strained from working by lamplight. On Wednesday evening, Henry came home with a cut on his arm from a sharp piece of wood. Beatrice immediately set aside her sewing and fetched water and clean cloth to clean the wound. "It is nothing," Henry protested, but he let her tend to him anyway. "It is not nothing if it gets infected," Beatrice said firmly, carefully washing away the blood. "You need to be more careful." "I will be. I was rushing, trying to get more done. Mr. Jensen told me to slow down, but I want to make sure we have enough money." "We will have enough, but not if you hurt yourself so badly you cannot work at all." Beatrice wrapped a clean bandage around his arm, her fingers gentle. "Please, Henry, be careful. I do not want you getting hurt because of me." Henry looked down at her, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. "I would do a lot more than risk a few cuts for you, Beatrice. You know that, do you not?" "I am beginning to," she whispered. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, might close the distance between them and finally acknowledge what had been building between them all week. But instead, he simply touched her cheek gently with his uninjured hand and smiled. "Thank you for patching me up. You are good at taking care of people." "I have had practice," she said, thinking of her father's long illness. That night, Beatrice could not concentrate on her sewing. Her thoughts kept drifting to Henry, to the way he had looked at her, to the gentle touch of his hand on her cheek. She wondered what it would be like to kiss him, to be held by those strong arms. The thoughts made her blush even though she was alone. She had never been in love before. There had been no time for courtship when she was younger, too busy helping her mother and then caring for her ailing father. She had wondered sometimes if she would ever experience the kind of love she had read about in books, the kind that made your heart race and your thoughts scatter. Now she knew. This was what it felt like, and it was both wonderful and terrifying. By Friday evening, they sat down to count their money. Henry had earned $18 from his 2 weeks of work at the ranch. Beatrice had earned $40 from her sewing, helped by several large orders from the boarding house and a wealthy rancher's wife who had needed 3 dresses altered. Together they had $58, just $2 short of what they needed. "We are so close," Beatrice said, staring at the money spread out on the table. "But close is not enough. Garrett will not accept partial payment, I know, but we still have tomorrow. Let me see what I can do." Henry's jaw was set in determination. "I will find a way to make up the difference." On Saturday morning, Henry went into town before dawn. Beatrice spent the morning in an agony of worry and anticipation. Everything depended on the next few hours. If they could not come up with the final $2, all their hard work would be for nothing. Henry returned just after noon, dusty and tired but with a triumphant expression. He pulled $2 silver from his pocket and placed them on the table with a flourish. "Where did you get that?" Beatrice asked in amazement. "I went to the saloon first thing this morning and asked if they needed any work done. The owner, Mr. Callahan, had been meaning to fix some broken chairs and tables, but had not gotten around to it. I spent the morning doing carpentry work and earned these $2. Beatrice felt tears of relief stream down her face. "We did it. We actually did it." "We did," Henry said, pulling her into a hug. "I told you we would. I told you I would not fade on you." Beatrice buried her face in his chest, her arms wrapping around him tightly. She could feel his heart beating strong and steady beneath her cheek, could smell the clean scent of soap and honest sweat. When she finally pulled back to look up at him, she saw that he was looking down at her with an expression of such tenderness that it made her breath catch. "Beatrice," he said softly, "there is something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "These past 2 weeks, working alongside you, getting to know you, it has meant everything to me. You are the strongest, most capable, most beautiful woman I have ever met. And I have fallen completely in love with you." Beatrice felt her heart soar. "Oh, Henry, I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you that very first night when you told me to count on you instead of the stars." Henry cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "I know this is fast, and I know we have only known each other for 2 weeks, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Beatrice Palmer, and if you will have me, I want to spend the rest of my life with you." "Yes," Beatrice breathed. "Yes, I will have you." When Henry finally kissed her, it was everything she had imagined and more. His lips were gentle but sure, and she felt the kiss all the way down to her toes. When they finally broke apart, they were both smiling. "We should probably go pay Garrett before I get distracted and kiss you again," Henry said, making Beatrice laugh. "Yes, we should definitely do that first." They walked into town together, hand in hand, carrying their hard-earned $60. Silas Garrett was surprised to see them, and even more surprised when they counted out the full amount owed onto his desk. "There is your $60, Mr. Garrett," Henry said with satisfaction. "All of it, as promised." Garrett counted the money twice, clearly looking for some reason to object, but he could find none. "Fine. Your account is settled, Miss Palmer. Your rent going forward is due on the 1st of each month." "We will be ready," Beatrice said confidently. Outside, she and Henry looked at each other and burst out laughing, giddy with relief and joy. They had done it. They had worked together and overcome what had seemed like an impossible obstacle. "I have an idea," Henry said. "Let us not go straight home. Let us take a walk up to the foothills. I want to show you something." "Curious." Beatrice agreed. They walked to the edge of town and up into the low hills that rose beyond the settlement. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces, and the air smelled of sage and dust. When they reached a small rise, Henry stopped and gestured to the view spread out before them. From here, they could see all of Parowan laid out below, the mountains rising majestically in the distance. The sky was a brilliant blue, endless and vast. "This is what I saw when I first rode into town 2 weeks ago," Henry said. "I stood right here and looked down at Parowan and thought, this is where I am supposed to be. This is where my wandering ends. And then I found you that same night and I knew I was right." Beatrice leaned against him, his arm coming around her shoulders. "I am so glad you did not just ride through. I am so glad you stopped and heard me counting stars. So am I. Though I have to say, I am a little jealous of those stars. You were paying an awful lot of attention to them when I first met you." Beatrice laughed and turned to face him, her hands resting on his chest. "I will never count stars again. I do not need to because I have you. You promised you would never fade and I believe you." "I keep my promises," Henry said seriously. "Always. And I promise you this, Beatrice Palmer. I am going to spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never have to be afraid again. I am going to work hard and build a good life for us. And I am going to love you until the day I die and probably beyond that too." "Those are big promises," Beatrice said, her eyes shining. "Then I better get started keeping them." Henry kissed her again, and Beatrice felt her fear, that heavy companion that had weighed on her for so long, finally release its grip on her heart. She was not alone anymore. She had Henry and he had her, and together they could face anything. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and growing love. Henry continued his job at the Jensen Ranch, and Mr. Jensen was so impressed with his work ethic and skill that he gave him a raise to $1.25 a day. Beatrice's sewing business flourished as word spread about her skill with a needle. She had more work than she could handle, and was able to save a little money each week after paying the rent and buying necessities. But more important than the financial stability was the deepening relationship between her and Henry. They spent every evening together, talking and laughing and learning everything about each other. Henry told her about his childhood in Wyoming, how his parents had died when he was 19, and he had spent the years since then drifting from place to place, never finding anywhere that felt like home. Beatrice told him about her mother's death from fever, about caring for her father through his long illness, about the loneliness that had been her constant companion. "I never thought I would find someone like you," Beatrice confessed one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "Someone who saw me when I was at my lowest and decided to help instead of taking advantage." "I never thought I would find someone like you either," Henry replied, his arm around her shoulders. "Someone who makes me want to stay in one place. Someone who makes me think about the future instead of just getting through today." "What kind of future do you think about?" Beatrice asked softly. Henry was quiet for a moment. "I think about marriage, children maybe if we are blessed with them. I think about building something permanent, something that lasts. Maybe saving up enough to buy a small ranch of our own someday. I think about growing old with you, Beatrice. That is the future I see." "I see that too," Beatrice whispered, her heart full. "I want all of that with you." "Then maybe we should make it official. Beatrice Palmer, will you marry me?" Beatrice turned to look at him, her eyes wide. "Are you serious? Completely serious?" "I know I do not have a fancy ring to offer you, at least not yet. And I know we have not known each other very long by conventional standards. But I know my own heart, and I know I want to spend my life with you. So what do you say? Will you marry me?" Beatrice felt tears of joy stream down her face. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, Henry, I will marry you." Henry let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Beatrice thought her heart might burst from happiness. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Parowan. Mrs. Walsh and her husband attended, along with Mrs. Donnelly from the boarding house and the Jensens from the ranch. It was not a large wedding, but it was filled with warmth and genuine affection. Beatrice wore her mother's best dress, altered to fit her, and Henry wore a new shirt that she had made for him specially. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Henry kissed her, Beatrice felt like the luckiest woman in the world. They celebrated with a simple dinner at the cabin, now officially their home together. Mrs. Donnelly had insisted on making a cake, and Mr. Jensen had brought a bottle of whiskey for toasting. As the sun set and their few guests departed, Henry carried Beatrice over the threshold of their cabin, both of them laughing. "Welcome home, Mrs. Owens," Henry said, setting her down gently. "I like the sound of that," Beatrice said, smiling up at him. Mrs. Beatrice Owens. That night, as they lay together in the bed they would now share, Beatrice thought about how much her life had changed in just 2 months. She had gone from being utterly alone and terrified to being married to a man she loved more than she had thought possible. It seemed like a miracle. "Are you happy?" Henry asked softly in the darkness. "Happier than I have ever been," Beatrice replied honestly. "Are you?" "More than you know. I spent so many years just existing, just moving from place to place without any real purpose. And now I have you, and I have a reason to work hard and build something. I have a future to look forward to. You gave me that, Beatrice." "We gave it to each other," Beatrice corrected gently. "I was drowning when you found me, Henry. You threw me a rope and pulled me to safety. We saved each other." "Then we are lucky twice over," Henry said, pulling her closer. "I love you, Beatrice. I love you too, more than words can say." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and for the first time in years, Beatrice did not have nightmares. She slept deeply and peacefully, safe in the knowledge that she was loved and protected. The following months were the happiest of Beatrice's life. She and Henry fell into a comfortable rhythm of married life. Henry continued working at the Jensen Ranch, and his dedication and skill earned him steady promotions. By spring, he was Mr. Jensen's foreman, overseeing the other ranch hands and helping to make decisions about the operation. The increased responsibility came with increased pay, and Henry was now earning enough that Beatrice could be more selective about her sewing work. But Beatrice enjoyed sewing and enjoyed the independence it gave her, so she continued taking commissions. She had become known throughout the area for her skill, and people came from neighboring towns to have her alter their garments or create new pieces. She had even begun designing and sewing dresses from scratch, a service that proved popular with the more prosperous women in the region. They were able to save money steadily, putting aside a little each week toward their dream of owning their own ranch someday. It seemed like an impossible goal at times, but Henry was determined. "Every dollar we save is a dollar closer," he would say, carefully adding their weekly savings to the small metal box they kept hidden under a loose floorboard. "We will get there, Beatrice. It might take years, but we will get there." "I know we will," Beatrice would reply. "And I do not mind waiting. As long as I am with you, I am happy wherever we are." As winter gave way to spring and spring to summer, Beatrice began to notice changes in her body. She was often tired, even though she was not working particularly hard. Certain smells made her nauseous, and her monthly courses stopped coming. She recognized the signs from helping her mother with the younger women in their old community. She was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Henry. One evening in June, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "Henry," she said softly, "we are going to have a baby." Henry's head whipped around to look at her, his eyes wide. "What, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. But yes, I am certain. We are going to be parents probably sometime in late winter or early spring." For a moment Henry just stared at her, and then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He let out a shout of pure joy and picked her up, spinning her around just as he had when she agreed to marry him. "We are having a baby," he shouted to the empty sky. "Do you hear that, world? Beatrice and I are having a baby." "Henry, put me down before you make me dizzy," Beatrice said, laughing. He set her down gently, then immediately knelt and pressed his ear to her stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your papa. I cannot wait to meet you." Beatrice ran her fingers through his hair, her heart overflowing with love. "You are going to be such a good father." "I am going to try my best," Henry said seriously, looking up at her. "I am going to give this child everything I never had: stability, security, two parents who love each other. A real home. We will give them all that together," Beatrice said. True to his word, Henry became even more dedicated to providing for his family. He took on extra work whenever it was available and carefully managed their money. By the time fall arrived, they had saved nearly $100, more money than Beatrice had ever seen in her life. "At this rate, in another 2 or 3 years we might have enough for a down payment on our own place," Henry said one evening as they counted their savings. "Maybe a small ranch with some grazing land. Nothing as big as Jensen's spread, but enough to support us and a few head of cattle." "That sounds wonderful," Beatrice said, her hand resting on her now visible belly. The baby had begun to move, small flutters that grew stronger each day. "Do you think we should tell them about their papa's dreams of being a rancher?" Henry laughed and leaned over to kiss her stomach. "Your mama thinks I dream too big, little one, but you watch. Your papa is going to make those dreams come true." "I do not think you dream too big," Beatrice protested. "I think you dream exactly the right amount. You taught me that dreams are worth working for." As autumn progressed and Beatrice's pregnancy became more obvious, the women of Parowan rallied around her. Mrs. Walsh brought her a basket of baby clothes that her own children had outgrown. Mrs. Donnelly knitted a beautiful blanket. Even some of Beatrice's sewing clients brought gifts: tiny gowns, soft booties, cloth diapers. Beatrice was touched by the generosity of these women who had become her friends. Winter arrived early that year, bringing cold winds and snow from the mountains. Beatrice found herself tiring more easily, and Henry insisted she cut back on her sewing work. "The baby is more important than a few extra dollars," he said firmly. "You need to rest and take care of yourself." "I am fine, Henry. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "I know, but you are my wife and this is my baby, so I get to worry." He kissed her forehead. "Humor me, please. Take it easy for these last few months." Beatrice agreed, though she still did some light sewing to pass the time during the long winter days when Henry was at work. She found herself thinking often about the baby, wondering if it would be a boy or a girl, if it would have Henry's dark hair or her blonde locks, if it would have his easy smile or her serious nature. Probably some combination of both, she thought with amusement. In February, when the snow lay thick on the ground and the wind howled around the cabin, Beatrice woke in the middle of the night with a sharp pain in her belly. She lay still for a moment, wondering if she had imagined it, but then another pain came, stronger this time. "Henry," she said, shaking his shoulder. "Henry, wake up." He was instantly alert, years of ranch work having made him a light sleeper. "What is it? Is it the baby?" "I think so. The pains have started." Henry was out of bed immediately, pulling on his clothes. "I am going to get Mrs. Walsh. She said to come for her when your time came. Will you be all right here alone for a few minutes?" "Yes, just hurry." Henry ran into town through the snow and returned 20 minutes later with Mrs. Walsh and Mrs. Donnelly, both of whom had experience with birthing babies. They took charge immediately, sending Henry to boil water and gather clean linens while they examined Beatrice. "Everything looks good, dear," Mrs. Walsh said kindly. "It is going to be a while yet, but the baby is positioned well. You just focus on breathing through the pains." The labor lasted through the rest of the night and into the next day. Henry stayed by Beatrice's side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. When the pains became intense and Beatrice cried out, he whispered words of encouragement and love. "You can do this, my love. You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer now." Finally, as the sun was beginning to set on that February afternoon with a final tremendous effort, Beatrice delivered their child into Mrs. Walsh's waiting hands. The baby let out a lusty cry and Beatrice collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. "It is a boy," Mrs. Walsh announced, quickly cleaning the infant and wrapping him in a blanket. "A healthy, beautiful boy." She placed the baby in Beatrice's arms, and Beatrice looked down at her son with wonder. He had a dusting of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn brown like his father's. His tiny fists waved in the air as he cried, already strong and determined. "Hello, little one," Beatrice whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my sweet boy." Henry, who had been standing frozen in awe, moved closer to look at his son. His own eyes were wet with tears. "He is perfect. Beatrice, he is absolutely perfect." "He is," Beatrice agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the past months but had never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Henry said, "What about Thomas? Thomas Henry Owens. We can call him Tommy." "Thomas Henry Owens," Beatrice repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Hello, Tommy." "Welcome to the world, little one." Henry reached out and gently touched his son's tiny hand. Tommy immediately grasped his father's finger with surprising strength, and Henry let out a choked laugh. "Look at that. He already has a good grip. He's going to be a strong boy." "He has a strong papa to teach him," Beatrice said softly. Mrs. Walsh and Mrs. Donnelly bustled about, cleaning up and making sure both Beatrice and the baby were comfortable. They gave Henry instructions on how to care for his wife over the next few weeks and promised to check in regularly. Before they left, Mrs. Walsh pulled Henry aside. "You have a good family here, Mr. Owens. A wife who loves you and a healthy son. You are a lucky man." "I know," Henry said seriously. "I thank God for them every day." After the women left, Henry sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Beatrice as they both gazed at their sleeping son. The baby was nestled in Beatrice's arms, tiny and perfect and completely dependent on them. "I cannot believe he is really here," Beatrice whispered. "Our son, Henry. We made a person. We did." Henry's voice was full of wonder. "And we are going to raise him right, Beatrice. We are going to give him everything he needs to grow up happy and healthy and strong." "I know we will. Look at how far we have come already." 2 years ago I was alone and terrified, counting stars because I did not know what else to do. And now I have you and Tommy and a home and a future. It seems like a miracle." "You are my miracle," Henry said, kissing the top of her head. "You and Tommy both. I am the luckiest man in the world." They sat there together, the three of them, as darkness fell outside and the fire crackled in the hearth. It was a perfect moment, and Beatrice wanted to hold on to it forever. The weeks and months that followed were both exhausting and wonderful. Tommy was a good baby for the most part, but he woke often during the night to nurse, leaving both Beatrice and Henry sleep-deprived. Henry continued working at the Jensen Ranch, but he came home every evening eager to see his son. He would spend hours just holding Tommy, talking to him in a soft voice about everything and nothing. Today at the ranch, we had to round up some cattle that had wandered into the north pasture. Henry would tell his son, who would stare up at him with wide eyes. When you are bigger, I am going to teach you how to ride and rope and do all the things a rancher needs to know. Would you like that, Tommy? Tommy would coo and wave his fists, and Henry would laugh with delight. Beatrice would watch them together and feel her heart swell with love. Henry was such a natural father, patient and gentle but also playful and fun. Watching him with their son was one of her greatest joys. As spring arrived and Tommy grew stronger and more alert, Beatrice slowly resumed some of her sewing work. It was harder now with a baby to care for, but she managed to do small projects during Tommy's naps. The extra income was helpful, and she enjoyed the work. One evening in May, as they sat at their table after putting Tommy to bed, Henry pulled out their savings box with a serious expression. "Beatrice, I need to talk to you about something. I have been thinking about our future, about our dreams of owning our own ranch." "What about them?" "Mr. Jensen approached me last week with a proposition. His ranch is doing well, better than expected, and he wants to expand. He offered to sell me a portion of his land, about 100 acres on the eastern edge of his property, along with some cattle and equipment to get started. He is willing to let me pay for it over time, a little each month, at a fair interest rate." Beatrice felt her pulse quicken. "That sounds like an amazing opportunity. What is the total cost?" $500 total, paid over 5 years. That would be about $8 a month, which I think we could manage with both of us working. He even said I could continue working as his foreman while I build up my own herd, so we would not lose that income. It sounds too good to be true. Why would he offer such generous terms? Henry smiled. Because he is a good man and he values loyal workers. He told me I have been the best foreman he has ever had, and he wants to help me get established. He also said that having a neighbor he trusts on that eastern section would be good for his own peace of mind. Beatrice's mind was racing. Their own land, their own ranch. It was everything they had dreamed about. "What do you think we should do?" "I think we should say yes. It is a risk, but it is a good risk. We have almost $150 saved. We could use that as a down payment and still have money left for emergencies. And I trust Mr. Jensen. If he says it is a fair deal, it is a fair deal." "Then we should do it," Beatrice said, feeling a surge of excitement. "Let us take the risk, Henry. Let us build that future we have been dreaming about." Henry's face broke into a wide smile. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. We have come so far already. This is just the next step." They sealed the agreement with a kiss, and the next day Henry went to Mr. Jensen and accepted his offer. Within a week, they were the owners of 100 acres of grazing land, 20 head of cattle, and the equipment they would need to run a small ranch. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. Over the next few years, they worked harder than they had ever worked before. Henry continued his job as Jensen's foreman while slowly building up his own herd in his spare time. Beatrice took in as much sewing work as she could manage while caring for Tommy, who grew from a baby into a curious, energetic toddler. They made their monthly payments to Mr. Jensen faithfully, never missing one even when times were tight. By the time Tommy was 3 years old, their small ranch was starting to become profitable. Their herd had grown to 50 head through careful management and good breeding. Henry had built a small barn and some corrals with help from some of the other ranch hands. It was modest compared to the larger spreads in the area, but it was theirs, and they were proud of it. One evening in the summer of 1881, as they sat on the porch of their cabin watching Tommy play in the yard with a wooden horse Henry had carved for him, Beatrice turned to her husband with a smile. "I have something to tell you." Henry looked at her, his eyebrows raised. "What is it?" "I am pregnant again. We are going to have another baby." Henry's face lit up with joy. "Another baby, Beatrice, that is wonderful news. You are not worried about the extra expense, the extra work. No, I am not worried. We have proven we can handle whatever comes our way. We are a good team, you and I. We will manage just fine with 2 children. He pulled her close and kissed her. When? I think around January or February, right around Tommy's birthday. Tommy is going to be a big brother. He is going to love that, and Tommy did love being a big brother. When his sister was born in late January of 1882, he was fascinated by the tiny baby. They named her Elizabeth Rose Owens, calling her Lizzie, and she had her mother's blonde hair and her father's brown eyes. Tommy would sit next to Beatrice whenever she nursed the baby, patting Lizzie's head gently and telling her about all the things he would teach her when she was bigger. Life continued in this way, busy and full and happy. Their ranch continued to grow, and by 1885 they had paid off their debt to Mr. Jensen and owned their land free and clear. They had 100 head of cattle now, and Henry had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Beatrice had mostly given up her sewing business to focus on raising their children and managing the household, though she still took on special projects from time to time. Tommy was now 7 years old, tall and strong for his age, with his father's easy smile and his mother's determination. He followed Henry everywhere, learning how to work cattle and mend fences and all the other skills he would need to one day run the ranch himself. Lizzie was 4, a bright and curious girl who loved to help her mother in the garden and had already announced that she wanted to learn to sew just like Mama. One evening in late summer, after the children were asleep, Henry and Beatrice sat on their porch as they had done so many times before. The stars were out, brilliant and countless in the clear Utah sky. "Do you ever count them anymore?" Henry asked, nodding toward the stars. Beatrice smiled and shook her head. "No, I have not counted stars since the night we met. I do not need to. I have you to count on instead, just like you promised. And I told you I would never fade. I have kept that promise, have I not? You have kept every promise you ever made to me." Beatrice took his hand. "Do you remember that night, Henry, how frightened I was, how lost? I remember. And I remember thinking that I had found something important, even though I did not quite understand what it was yet. I knew I had to help you, that walking away was not an option. I am so glad you did not walk away. You saved my life that night. Not just by helping me with the rent, but by giving me hope, by showing me that I was not alone. You saved mine too, you know. I had been drifting for so long, never finding a place to belong. And then I found you, and suddenly everything made sense. You gave me a purpose, a reason to stay, a future to work toward." Henry gestured to the ranch spread out around them. "Look at what we have built together, Beatrice. This land, this home, our children. It all started because you were brave enough to trust a stranger who wandered out of the darkness. And you were kind enough to stop and help when you could have just kept walking." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching the stars. Beatrice thought about how far they had come in the 7 years since that terrifying night when her father had died, and she had thought her world was ending. She had been so afraid then, counting stars because she did not know what else to do. And then Henry had appeared, offering her hope and help and eventually love. "What are you thinking about?" Henry asked softly. "About how much I love you, about how grateful I am for everything we have, about how happy I am. I am happy too, happier than I ever thought I could be." Henry squeezed her hand. "Do you know what I think about when I look at those stars now?" "What?" "I think about how they led me to you. I was following them that night when I got lost and ended up at your cabin. If I had taken a different path, if I had not gotten turned around in the dark, I might have never met you. Those stars brought us together, Beatrice. Then I am grateful to them. But I am more grateful to you for stopping, for listening, for caring about a frightened woman counting stars in the dark. I will always care about you. I will always be here for you. That is a promise that will never fade, no matter how many years pass. Beatrice leaned her head on Henry's shoulder, feeling completely at peace. She had everything she had ever wanted, and so much more than she had dared to dream of that terrifying night 7 years ago. She had a husband who loved her deeply, 2 beautiful children, a home of their own, and a future full of promise. "Count on me instead," Henry had told her that night. "I will never fade." And he had kept that promise every single day since. He had stood by her through difficult times and celebrated with her during the good times. He had worked himself to exhaustion to provide for their family, and never once complained about the sacrifices. He had been her partner in every sense of the word, sharing the burdens and the joys equally. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. Their ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Tommy grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch and learning everything his father could teach him. Lizzie grew into a capable young woman who inherited her mother's skill with a needle and her father's head for business. In 1890, when Tommy was 15 and Lizzie was 12, Beatrice and Henry were blessed with another child, a surprise baby they named Samuel after Henry's father. Tommy and Lizzie doted on their baby brother, and the ranch rang with laughter and life. As the new century approached, Henry and Beatrice found themselves becoming respected members of the Parowan community. They were known for their fairness in business dealings, their generosity to neighbors in need, and the strength of their marriage. Young couples would sometimes ask them for advice, wanting to know the secret of their happy union. "There is no secret," Henry would say with a smile. "You just have to find the right person and then work hard every day to deserve them. And you have to be willing to help each other through the hard times," Beatrice would add. "Life is not always easy, but it is much easier when you face it together." In the spring of 1900, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party attended by friends and neighbors from all over the region. Mr. Jensen, now elderly but still sharp, made a toast. 20 years ago, I hired a drifting cowboy who was looking for work. I had no idea that he would become not just my best foreman, but also my neighbor and friend. Henry and Beatrice Owens are proof that hard work, determination, and love can overcome any obstacle. Here is to 20 more years. Everyone raised their glasses, and Beatrice looked at Henry with tears in her eyes. He was older now, his dark hair showing threads of silver, his face more lined. But his eyes still held that same kindness and strength that had drawn her to him all those years ago. And his smile still made her heart skip a beat. "What are you thinking about?" Henry asked, echoing the question he had asked her so many times over the years. "About that night, the night we met. I was so scared, Henry, I thought my life was over, and then you appeared and changed everything." "Best night of my life," Henry said simply. "The night I stopped wandering and started living." As the party continued around them, they slipped away to their familiar spot on the porch. The stars were out, as bright and beautiful as ever, but Beatrice did not count them. She had not needed to in 20 years. She had found something far more reliable than stars to guide her way. She had found Henry, and he had kept his promise. He had never faded. The years of the new century brought more changes. Tommy married a girl from a neighboring ranch and began building his own home on a portion of the Owens land. Lizzie showed such talent for design that she opened her own dressmaking shop in Parowan, which quickly became popular throughout the region. Samuel grew from a baby into a bright, inquisitive boy who loved books and learning. Through it all, Henry and Beatrice remained each other's constant support and comfort. They weathered droughts that threatened their cattle and harsh winters that tested their resolve. They celebrated births of grandchildren and mourned the deaths of friends. They grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. In 1910, on a warm summer evening much like the one when they had first met, Henry and Beatrice sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were in their 50s now, their bodies showing the wear of years of hard work, but their spirits remained strong. Samuel, now 20, was inside studying by lamplight, preparing for his college entrance exams. He wanted to be a lawyer, and his parents supported his dreams. "Can you believe it has been 32 years since we met?" Beatrice asked, her hand in Henry's as always. "It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once," Henry replied. "Do you have any regrets, Beatrice? Anything you wish had been different?" Beatrice thought about it carefully. "No regrets, not one. My life has been exactly what I needed it to be. Hard sometimes, but always full of love. You gave me that, Henry. You gave me a life worth living. You gave me the same. I was nothing before I met you, just a drifter with no purpose. You gave me everything. A home, a family, a reason to get up in the morning. I love you more today than I did 32 years ago, and I loved you so much then that I thought my heart might burst from it. I love you more too. I did not think it was possible to love someone more than I loved you on our wedding day, but I was wrong. Love grows, Henry. It gets stronger and deeper with time. Like a good tree," Henry said with a smile. "Roots going down deep, branches reaching high." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. Beatrice felt a sense of profound peace wash over her. This was home. This was love. This was the life she had built with Henry, one day at a time, one challenge at a time, one triumph at a time. "Do you remember what you told me that first night?" Beatrice asked. "About counting on you instead of the stars." "Of course I remember. That was the night I fell in love with you, though I did not quite realize it yet. You have kept that promise, Henry. For 32 years, through everything life has thrown at us, you have kept that promise. You have never faded, not even for a moment. And I never will. Even when I am old and gray and can barely get out of bed in the morning, I will still be here for you." "That is a promise that lasts forever, Beatrice." "Forever," Beatrice echoed, squeezing his hand. "I like the sound of that." As the last light faded from the sky and the stars came out in full force, brilliant and countless above them, Beatrice realized that she had never stopped being grateful for that terrifying night when her father died, and she had sat alone counting stars to fight her fear. Because that fear had led her to Henry, and Henry had led her to this beautiful life. She had been counting stars, and he had told her to count on him instead. It had seemed like such a simple thing at the time, just words offered by a kind stranger. But those words had changed everything. They had been a promise and a prophecy, a commitment and a covenant. And Henry had honored that promise every single day since. The lonely cowboy who had wandered into her life on that dark night had become her husband, her partner, her love. He had given her hope when she had none, strength when she was weak, and love when she was alone. And she had given him the same in return. Together they had built something lasting and beautiful, something that would endure long after they were gone. Their children would carry on their legacy, running the ranch and raising families of their own. Their grandchildren would play in the same fields where Tommy and Lizzie had played. The land they had worked so hard to acquire and nurture would support generations to come. And the love story that had begun with a frightened woman counting stars and a lonely cowboy offering help would be told and retold, an example of what two people could accomplish when they faced life together. As Beatrice and Henry sat together under the stars that night, surrounded by everything they had built and everyone they loved. They knew with absolute certainty that they had found what everyone searches for: a love that lasts, a partnership that endures, and a promise that never fades. The stars continued their eternal dance across the sky, constant and beautiful. But Beatrice did not count them. She did not need to anymore. She had found something better than stars to light her way. She had found Henry, and his love had guided her through every dark night and bright day of the past 32 years. And she knew, with the deep certainty that comes from a lifetime of shared experience, that his love would continue to guide her for all the years to come. They sat together until the night grew cold and Samuel called them inside for tea. As they stood, Henry pulled Beatrice close for a kiss, sweet and gentle and full of the comfortable affection of long marriage. "I love you, Mrs. Owens," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Owens." Now and always. Hand in hand, they walked into their home, leaving the stars to shine unnoticed in the darkness. Beatrice did not need to count them anymore. She had counted on Henry instead, just as he had asked her to do all those years ago, and he had kept his promise. He had never faded, not for a single moment, and he never would. That was a promise that would last beyond this life and into whatever came next. A promise as eternal and unchanging as the stars themselves, but so much more precious because it was real and it was theirs, and it had been earned through years of devotion and hard work and unwavering love. The story that had begun in fear and desperation had become a testament to hope, to trust, and to the transformative power of love, and it would endure, just as their love had endured forever and always.